I stared at Blake in disbelief as he knelt before me, holding out a sparkling diamond ring. "Harper, will you make me the happiest man alive and marry me?" My heart raced, and I felt a rush of excitement mixed with nervousness. This was all happening so fast, but I couldn't deny the love I felt for him. "Blake, this is so sudden." "Yes, I will." He slipped the ring onto my finger and we embraced, garnering applause from the other patrons of the high-end restaurant. In that moment, everything seemed perfect, like a fairy tale come true. Little did I know, the fairy tale was about to take a dark turn. A few days later, Blake and I were having dinner at his parents' lavish estate, where I would officially meet his family. I had heard stories about their wealth and influence, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge of anxiety. As we sat down at the table, Blake's mother, Carolyn, fixed me with a scrutinizing gaze. "Harper, what's your highest level of education?" I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. I graduated from a community college while my mom raised me alone." Carolyn's eyes narrowed, and she turned to my mother, Jennifer, who had accompanied me. "You raised her alone?" Jennifer nodded, her posture rigid. "Yes, I'm a single mother. I've worked hard to provide for Harper." Carolyn scoffed, and before I could react, she picked up her glass of wine and flung it at Jennifer, drenching her in the deep red liquid. "Mother, what are you doing?" Blake exclaimed, but Carolyn silenced him with a wave of her hand. "This engagement is over," she declared, her voice dripping with contempt. "Harper is not a suitable match for our family." I sat there, frozen in shock, as Carolyn and Blake's father, David, berated us, their words cutting deeper than any knife ever could. As Jennifer and I made our way out, I overheard Blake's voice from another room. "Compared to Harper, Melanie is perfect. Educated, well-connected, it's a no-brainer." My heart shattered into a million pieces, and a burning rage ignited within me. Without thinking, Jennifer and I burst back into the room, startling Blake and his family. "You'll regret this, Blake," I spat, my voice trembling with fury. "I'll make sure of it." Jennifer's eyes burned with determination as she added, "We'll ruin your precious family's company if it's the last thing we do." With those words, we stormed out, leaving behind a stunned silence. The fairy tale had ended, and a new chapter of revenge was about to begin. The next few days were a blur of anger and humiliation. I tried my best to maintain a professional demeanor at work, but every time I saw Blake, a wave of resentment washed over me. "Harper, can we just act professional?" he had the audacity to ask one day as we passed each other in the hallway. I fixed him with a withering glare. "Don't talk to me. Ever." His face fell, but I couldn't bring myself to care. He had shattered my heart, and his family had treated my mother and me like garbage. Meanwhile, Jennifer was on a warpath, determined to bring down the Turners at any cost. "We need everything on them," she told me one evening over the phone. "Financial records, emails, anything that could be used as leverage." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. They'll never see it coming. With a newfound sense of purpose, I started paying closer attention to Blake's behavior at work. I noticed him taking frequent calls in hushed tones, disappearing for hours at a time without explanation. And then there was Melanie, the woman he had chosen over me. She would strut around the office like she owned the place, always throwing me condescending looks whenever our paths crossed. One day, as I was working late, I overheard Melanie on the phone in the break room. "Don't worry, baby. I'll take care of everything. Harper is no threat to us." My blood boiled at the smug tone in her voice. She had no idea what was coming. Over the next few weeks, Jennifer and I meticulously gathered evidence of Blake's misdeeds. Financial statements that didn't add up, emails discussing shady business deals, even recordings of him bad-mouthing his own family. "They're going to pay for what they did to us," Jennifer said, her voice laced with determination. I nodded, my jaw clenched. The Turners had made a grave mistake in underestimating us. Their perfect little world was about to come crashing down around them. With our plan set in motion, Jennifer and I decided to pay one final visit to the Turners' estate under the guise of returning Blake's engagement ring. As we pulled up to the imposing gates, my heart was pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. "Are you ready for this?" Jennifer asked, her expression steely. I took a deep breath and nodded. More than ready. We rang the bell, and a few moments later, the gates swung open, allowing us to proceed up the winding driveway. As we approached the front door, it opened to reveal none other than Melanie, her perfectly coiffed hair and designer outfit a stark contrast to our more modest attire. "Well, well, if it isn't the scorned ex-fiancée and her mom," she sneered, looking us up and down with disdain. Before I could respond, Carolyn's shrill voice echoed from inside. "Who is it, Melanie?" "Just some unwanted guests," Melanie called back, her lips curling into a smug smile. Carolyn appeared in the doorway, her nose turned up in distaste. "What are you doing here?" I held up the ring box, my hand trembling slightly. "I'm here to return the ring," Carolyn scoffed. "Get out of my house." But I stood my ground, feeling a surge of confidence coursing through me. "Not until you hear what I have to say." Melanie rolled her eyes. This should be good. Ignoring her jab, I pulled out my phone and hit play on the damning recordings we had gathered. Blake's voice filled the air, discussing shady business deals and misappropriation of company funds. Carolyn's face drained of color as she listened, her eyes widening in horror. "Blake, what have you done?" As if on cue, Blake himself appeared, his expression turning to one of panic when he saw us. "Harper? Mom, what's going on?" "You tell us, son." David's gruff voice came from behind him. "Care to explain these recordings?" Blake's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but no words came out. Melanie, however, found her voice. "Blake, you assured me everything was above board. You lied to me." The tension in the air was palpable as the Turners turned on each other, accusations and insults flying back and forth. In the chaos, Jennifer leaned over and whispered in my ear, "Their empire is crumbling, just as we planned." I allowed myself a small smile, feeling a sense of vindication wash over me. The Turners had brought this upon themselves, and now they were reaping what they had sown. "Good riddance," I muttered, watching as Melanie stormed off, her perfect facade finally shattered. After the explosive confrontation at the Turners' estate, I expected Blake to slink away in shame, tail between his legs. Instead, he had the audacity to show up at the office the next day, acting as if nothing had happened. As I sat at my desk, trying to focus on work, I could feel his eyes boring into the back of my head. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "What do you want, Blake?" I hissed, whirling around to face him. He held up his hands in a placating gesture. "Harper, I know things got heated the other night, but can't we just move past it, for the sake of professionalism?" I let out a humorless laugh. "Professionalism? After everything you and your family put me through?" Blake's expression hardened. "That's ancient history. Melanie and I have moved on, and you should too." My blood boiled at the mention of his new fiancée, the woman he had chosen over me, only for her to turn on him when the truth came out. "Don't you dare say her name in front of me," I spat. "And don't think for a second that this is over. Your family's downfall is just beginning." Blake's eyes flashed with something akin to fear, but he quickly masked it with a smirk. "Whatever helps you sleep at night, Harper." With that, he turned and sauntered away, leaving me seething. The nerve of that man, acting like he was untouchable. Over the next few weeks, Blake continued to pester me, sending me emails and leaving voicemails, all in the name of professionalism. Each time I deleted or ignored them, my hatred for him growing stronger by the day. Meanwhile, Jennifer and I were hard at work, gathering even more evidence of the Turners' misdeeds. Financial records, incriminating emails, you name it. We were building an airtight case against them, one that would ensure their empire crumbled to dust. And then there was Melanie. The woman who had once looked down her nose at me now seemed lost and adrift, her perfect life in tatters. Part of me felt a twinge of satisfaction at seeing her brought low, but mostly I just pitied her. She had been just as much a pawn in Blake's games as I had. As the weeks turned to months, the walls continued to close in on the Turners. Their once mighty company was hemorrhaging money and clients, and rumors of their shady dealings were beginning to circulate in the media. Through it all, I remained focused and professional, letting my work speak for itself. And whenever Blake tried to engage me, I shut him down with a withering glare or a curt "leave me alone." The time for words was over. Now, it was time for action. And Jennifer and I were ready to deliver the final blow that would bring the Turners to their knees. As the weeks passed, my determination to bring down the Turners only grew stronger. Jennifer and I spent countless hours poring over the evidence we'd gathered, looking for any weak spots in their armor. "We need to hit them where it hurts the most," Jennifer said one evening, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Their reputation, their finances, everything." I nodded in agreement. "They'll regret the day they ever crossed us." Meanwhile, at the office, I couldn't help but notice Blake's behavior becoming increasingly erratic. He would disappear for hours at a time, only to return looking disheveled and stressed. I couldn't help but wonder what shady dealings he was up to now. One day, as I was leaving for the evening, I caught sight of Blake in a heated conversation with a man I didn't recognize. Their voices were hushed, but the tension was palpable. "You have to take care of this, Blake," the man hissed. "Your family's reputation is on the line." Blake ran a hand through his hair, his expression one of pure desperation. I know. Just give me a little more time." As they parted ways, Blake caught sight of me and froze, his eyes wide like a deer in headlights. Before he could say anything, I turned on my heel and walked away, my mind whirling with questions. What kind of trouble was Blake in now? And more importantly, how could I use it to my advantage? Over the next few days, I made it a point to keep a closer eye on Blake's comings and goings. I noticed him taking more and more clandestine meetings, always with different, shady-looking characters. It was clear that whatever he was involved in, it was deep and far-reaching, and if my hunch was correct, it could be the key to finally bringing down the entire Turner empire. As I shared my observations with Jennifer, her eyes lit up with a fierce determination. "We need to get to the bottom of this," she said, her voice steely, "no matter what it takes." And so we hatched a plan. We would tail Blake, document his every move, and gather as much evidence as possible about his secret dealings. It was a risky move, but one we were both willing to take. The first few times we followed him, it was relatively uneventful. Blake would meet with his associates, exchange hushed words and cryptic documents, and then go on his way. But then, one night, everything changed. We had been tailing Blake for hours, watching as he bounced from one seedy location to the next. Finally, he pulled up to a rundown warehouse on the outskirts of town. "This is it," Jennifer whispered, her grip tightening on the steering wheel. "I can feel it." We watched with bated breath as Blake slipped inside, disappearing into the shadows. After a few tense minutes, we decided to follow, our hearts pounding in our chests. What we saw inside that warehouse would change everything. After months of meticulous planning and gathering evidence, the time had finally come to confront Blake and his family head-on. With a deep breath, I steeled my nerves and rang the doorbell of the Turner estate, Jennifer by my side. The door swung open, and there stood Melanie, perfectly coiffed as always. Her eyes widened in surprise when she saw us. Well, if it isn't the scorned ex and her mother," she sneered. "Come to beg for scraps." Before I could respond, Carolyn's shrill voice echoed from inside. "Who is it, Melanie?" "Just some unwanted guests," Melanie called back, her lips curling into a smug smile. Carolyn appeared in the doorway, her face twisting into a scowl. "You two have some nerve showing up here." I held up the ring box, my hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "I'm here to return the ring, Carolyn, and to settle some unfinished business." Carolyn scoffed. "Get out of my house before I call the authorities." But I stood my ground, feeling a surge of confidence wash over me. "Not until you hear what I have to say." Melanie rolled her eyes. This should be good. Ignoring her jab, I pulled out my phone and hit play on the damning recordings we had gathered. Blake's voice filled the air, discussing shady business deals and misappropriation of company funds. Carolyn's face drained of color as she listened, her eyes widening in horror. "Blake, what have you done?" As if on cue, Blake himself appeared, his expression turning to one of panic when he saw us. "Harper? Mom, what's going on?" "You tell us, son," David's gruff voice came from behind him. "Care to explain these recordings?" Blake opened and closed his mouth like a fish out of water, but no words came out. Melanie, however, found her voice. "Blake, you assured me everything was above board. You lied to me." The tension in the air was palpable as the Turners turned on each other, accusations and insults flying back and forth. In the chaos, Jennifer leaned over and whispered in my ear, "Their empire is crumbling, just as we planned." I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. The Turners had brought this upon themselves, and now they were reaping what they had sown. As Melanie stormed off in a huff, her perfect facade finally shattered, Blake rounded on me, his eyes blazing with fury. "You did this," he spat. "You and your mother have gone too far." I met his gaze unflinchingly. "No, Blake. You brought this on yourself with your lies and deceit. It's time to face the consequences." With those words, I turned and walked away, leaving the Turners to their imploding empire. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The fallout from our explosive confrontation at the Turner estate was swift and severe. Blake's family was in complete disarray, their carefully constructed facade crumbling around them. As the news of Blake's shady dealings and misuse of company funds hit the media, the Turners found themselves under intense scrutiny from the public and the authorities alike. Carolyn and David were forced to make a humiliating public statement, apologizing for their son's misdeeds and vowing to cooperate with any investigations. But even as their empire teetered on the brink of collapse, the Turners remained defiant, lashing out at anyone and everyone they could. Blake, in particular, seemed to have lost all sense of reason. "This is all your fault," he raged at me one day, as we crossed paths in the office. "You and your mother have destroyed everything." I met his gaze coolly, unfazed by his outburst. "We only exposed the truth, Blake. Your own actions did the rest." He let out a bitter laugh. "Truth? You have no idea what the truth is, Harper." Before I could respond, he leaned in close, his eyes burning with a mix of anger and desperation. "You think you've won, but this is far from over. I'll make sure you and your mother pay for what you've done." His words sent a chill down my spine, but I refused to show any fear. "Is that a threat, Blake?" He stepped back, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "Take it however you want, Harper. Just know that no one crosses me and gets away with it." With that ominous warning, he turned and stormed off, leaving me to wonder just how far he was willing to go to exact his revenge. In the days that followed, the Turner family's dirty laundry continued to be aired for all to see. It seemed like every day brought a new bombshell revelation, from shady business deals to illicit affairs and everything in between. And through it all, Blake remained defiant, refusing to take responsibility for his actions. Instead, he doubled down on his threats against me and my mother, making it clear that he wouldn't rest until he saw us suffer. But as the walls closed in on the Turners, a surprising ally emerged, Melanie, Blake's former fiancée. Scorned and betrayed by the man she thought she knew, she had no qualms about spilling every sordid detail of their relationship and Blake's misdeeds. "He lied to me from the start," she revealed in a tell-all interview. "I was just another pawn in his game, a means to an end." As Melanie's revelations hit the airwaves, the public's outrage towards Blake and his family reached a fever pitch. Protests erupted outside the Turner estate, with people demanding justice and accountability. And through it all, I remained steadfast, my resolve only strengthened by the knowledge that we were on the right side of this battle. Blake and his family had brought this reckoning upon themselves, and now they were facing the consequences of their actions. As the dust settled and the Turners' once mighty empire lay in ruins, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. We had fought for what was right, and in the end, the truth had prevailed. In the aftermath of the Turner family scandal, the fallout was swift and severe. Blake's father, David, was forced to resign from his position as CEO of the company, and Carolyn found herself ostracized from the social circles she once ruled with an iron fist. As for Blake himself, he faced a slew of legal troubles, with investigations into his shady business dealings and misuse of company funds. It was a humiliating downfall for someone who had once seemed so untouchable. Through it all, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. After months of meticulous planning and execution, our revenge had been achieved. The Turners' once mighty empire was in shambles, their reputation in tatters. "They got what they deserved," Jennifer said to me one evening, a satisfied smile on her face. "Their empire is crumbling, and it's all thanks to us." I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. We had fought for justice, and in the end, the truth had prevailed. In the weeks that followed, I found myself adjusting to a new normal. The company I worked for had undergone a major restructuring in the wake of the Turner scandal, and I was transferred to a different department, far away from the toxic environment that had once surrounded Blake and his family. It was a fresh start, and one that I embraced wholeheartedly. Gone were the days of walking on eggshells and dealing with Blake's constant harassment. Instead, I was able to focus on my work and thrive in a supportive, positive environment. As for my personal life, I found myself taking a step back from the dating scene. After the betrayal I had experienced with Blake, I was wary of opening my heart too quickly. But deep down, I knew that one day, when the time was right, I would find someone who truly deserved my love and trust. In the meantime, I poured my energy into my career and my relationship with my mother. Jennifer and I had grown even closer through our shared ordeal, and we found strength in each other's support. "You're an inspiration, Harper," she told me one day, her eyes shining with pride. "You never gave up, even when the odds were stacked against us." I smiled, feeling a warmth bloom in my chest. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mom. We're a team, always." As the months passed, the Turner family scandal faded from the headlines, but the lessons I had learned would stay with me forever. I had seen firsthand the consequences of greed, deceit, and entitlement, and I vowed never to let those toxic traits take root in my own life. Instead, I focused on cultivating patience, discernment, and a strong moral compass. I knew that true happiness and fulfillment could only come from living an authentic, honest life, something that the Turners had clearly failed to grasp. And as for the future, well, the possibilities were endless. With the weight of revenge lifted from my shoulders, I felt free to pursue new opportunities and embrace whatever challenges life had in store. One thing was certain: I would never again let anyone underestimate me or treat me like a second-class citizen. The Turners had learned that lesson the hard way, and I was all the stronger for it.